Don't forget to go to ashkicking.com for pound the best home health and beauty fragrance products. Anything else you want to say to your fans, man?
Man, shout out to Dante's Boxing Nation. You know, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, Earl Spence Jr., my whole name, and just look out for me.
Yes, sir. Let me dig into your brain, folks.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Boy, oh boy. I'm telling you, man, you can only fly under the radar for so long. But eventually, people are going to start connecting the dots and start to notice inconsistencies. And one of the many professional boxers that noticed some of those inconsistencies recently is Espn Lara when it comes to ESPN's American sports writer Dan Raphael, who is the lead boxing reporter for ESPN. Now, after Billy Joe Saunders dominated David Lemieux this past weekend, this is what Dan Raphael had to say. A Saunders boxing lesson in round 1. Hashtag Saunders Lemieux, hashtag boxing. Now, there's no doubt about it that it's nothing wrong with saying that Billy Joe Saunders did a great job. I mean, I've said in many videos after the fight that Billy Joe Saunders, he looked great. He looked impressive. I've said that. The problem with Dan Raphael is not too often do we hear Dan say this about fighters on the coincidental list, including the one in this picture right here named Espn Lara. So this is what Espn Lara had to say in response to what Dan just recently posted. Either he's racist or just a hater. ESPN should be ashamed to have biased and racist fan writing for them. End quote. You know, it's a lot to say about this right here, man. But let me start with the translation. Just in case people didn't understand exactly what Espn Lara just said when he said either he's racist or just a hater, let me translate it. What he means is either this man is a racist or he's an extreme racist. Those are the only two options. I mean, it's kind of like saying either he's a killer or he's a serial killer. Either that person is gay or he just casually dates men, right? This is pretty much what Espn Lara just said. You know, I go back to what I said at the beginning of this video. You can only fly under the radar for so long. See, the thing is, Dan Raphael has got so comfortable with being able to say whatever it is he wants to say, no matter how inconsistent it is, no matter how hypocritical it is, without any type of backlash. It's like that person that comes to your house who sees money sitting around, and he or she, they start to take a little bit of it. And then they come back the next day or the next week to see if you notice the money is even missing, right? Once they assume you don't notice, then they start taking a little bit more. Then it gets to the point to where they just go in there and just take all the damn money. This is pretty much what Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, and Dan Raphael, this is what they have been doing for years. They wanted to see if they would get any type of backlash for being hypocritical, for being racially hypocritical. And once they noticed no one complained, that's when they went full throttle. You know what? Let's go ahead and just look at the pattern of Dan Raphael recently. All the stuff I'm going to tell you guys is fact. It's not speculation. I'm stating facts right now. It's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Okay? Let's start with Andre Ward. Andre Ward is an American gold medalist, won a gold medal for his country, and also won an international tournament in the Super 6, representing his country. Now, Andre Ward, when he went into the Sullivan-Barrera fight, it was argued that Andre Ward could be considered pound for pound number one, the best fighter in the world, because remember, when Floyd Mayweather was number one, Ward had been number two behind him for quite some time. So it made sense if you were to say that, Andre Ward is number two, but that's neither here nor there. The most important thing to note is Andre Ward is an American gold medalist, right? He's one of the best fighters in the world at this time. Now, the American sports writer, Dan Raphael, who works for the biggest sporting network in the country, who's being paid to cover these fights. He doesn't have to pay for travel expenses and all that kind of stuff, right? Like I do when I cover all these fights. Like when I flew to California to cover Golovkin fights, Andre Ward fights, etc., etc., etc. Dan Raphael, he has the luxury to where he doesn't have to pay for these expenses once again. So the rhetorical question is, why didn't the biggest American sports writer, the only representative of ESPN, or at least the main one, why didn't he show up and cover this event? Andre Ward versus Sullivan-Barrera. 1 million people tuned in to watch that fight. But yet, this guy didn't show up and cover it. Now, we could say, oh, maybe he was sick. Maybe he had a death in the family. Maybe something drastic happened. Last minute, couldn't make it, right? But check this out. He didn't do this one time. Andre Ward's very next fight, he didn't show up at that fight either. Then on top of him not showing up to the Andre Ward versus Alexander brand fight, then he wrote an article and he titled the article, "The Most Boring Fight Ever on HBO." Now, just in case you guys forgot what Dan Raphael just recently said about BJ Saunders outboxing someone, let me refresh your memory. Dan Raphael said it was a boxing lesson. But when Andre Ward was outboxing Alexander Brand, it was the most boring fight ever on HBO. And while we're talking about outboxing, Edeslani Lara has a style very similar to BJ. They're both southpaws. They're both boxers, right? Edeslani Lara has been just as impressive as BJ Saunders. I'm talking about in the majority of his fights. You can't try to discount a person's accomplishments for one or two performances that you deem to be not that exciting. So if Edeslani Lara has 30 exciting fights versus 2 that weren't that exciting, you have to look at the 30 fights and give him credit for those, right? With that being said, once again, Dan Raphael never gave Edeslani Lara, Guillermo Rigo, Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather that type of praise. This is the point that Lara is making. Now let's go back to that Andre Ward situation. So the biggest American reporter working for the biggest American sports network, he doesn't show up to an American gold medalist who's considered pound for pound top 3 at a minimum, one of the best fighters in the world, a fight that's televised on HBO. Dan Raphael, he doesn't make it to Andre Ward's last 2 fights, but he manages to make it to Ward versus Kovalev. He makes it to those fights, but to add insult to injury, Dan Raphael, he also finds a way to make it to Golovkin versus Willie Monroe, right? Now, I know for a fact that he was there because I covered that fight as well. Dan Raphael, he covered that fight. And I found it interesting because shouts out to Barbershop Conversations. Barbershop interviewed Dan Raphael. And I remember he was asking Dan, he said, does Willie have any chance? And I remember this. I remember Dan Raphael, he just put that look on his face like, come on, man. We know Willie has no chance at all. He started talking about all of Willie Monroe's flaws, his shortcomings, the fact that he doesn't have any power, etc., etc., etc. So he basically said he has no chance. But yet, Dan Raphael, he'll travel to watch a foreigner like Golovkin fight a guy that, by his own admission, believes that he has no chance at all. But you won't fly next door to cover a countryman who's going up against an undefeated Cuban fighter? These are the inconsistencies that I'm talking about, guys. And just to put this in the most elementary perspective, can you imagine pound for pound top 3, one of the best fighters in the world from Mexico, fighting in Mexico, and the largest sporting network channel in the country, they don't even cover the fight? Would that ever happen, guys? Of course, that's a rhetorical question. We could use any country when it comes to those type of examples, right? In the Philippines, biggest fighter in the Philippines, pound for pound, one of the best fighters in the world, fighting on a big network already. But yet, the Filipino media, they don't come out to cover the fight. It would never happen. Japan, Russia, the UK. It would only happen in America when Dan Raphael is in charge of covering events for ESPN. That is a fact. That is a fact that this would never happen in another country, guys. That's a fact. That's not just talking. That is a fact. Let's talk about some other suspicious things that Dan Raphael has done. Why did Dan Raphael block Guillermo Rigo from one of his social accounts, one of his social site accounts? Now understand this. When you're a black reporter, you can't even say the same things that non-black people are saying about Gennady Golovkin. For example, if I interview someone who's not black and they criticize him, nobody will really attack that guy for criticizing Golovkin. But when you're black and you criticize him, they start using code words. They start saying, oh, you're a racist. And these are just code words. Because when they call them black people racist, they really want to call them something else. But they have to use code words because they already know that what I do is I expose racism. So they're not going to come out and call you a straight up N-word or this and that. So they're going to use code words. Just like they use code words that are only used for black fighters, coincidentally, when they say they're boring, they're this, they're that. Just like Dan Raphael, he says that Andre Ward is boring, but yet, meanwhile, BJ Saunders is putting on a boxing lesson, right? These are all code words: boring, runner, etc., etc., etc. These are all code words. So my point is, how is it that if we criticize and even ask the question if Golovkin is going to fight his mandatory, Charlo, is he going to fight Andre, is he going to fight Jacobs in a rematch, etc., 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 how is it possible that a man that is representing the largest, the biggest sporting network channel in the nation can block a fighter while posing pictures of him and other fighters on his Twitter account, while blocking other fighters and also discrediting that fighter that he blocked? Like I just alluded to before, you can't even criticize Gennady Golovkin if you're on a coincidental list. But when it comes to Dan Raphael, he can block professional fighters from his Twitter account, his Facebook account, or whichever social media site account it is. What would be said about me if you guys found out that I blocked Gennady Golovkin from my Twitter account? but he's the only one that I blocked. What would you say about me? Once again, let's just reverse everything. I have pictures of me and Floyd Mayweather, Andre Ward, and Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence. I have pictures of me with these guys, right? Meanwhile, I block Gennady Golovkin and I don't cover any of his fights. Even if I'm being paid to go cover his fights, I refuse to cover Golovkin versus Willie Monroe, Golovkin versus this guy, that guy, etc., etc. What would you say about me? Because that question I just posed right now, that is exactly what Dan Raphael has done. So it's not a hypothetical when I'm talking about Dan Raphael. These are facts that he actually did this. And then you have the Lomachenko versus Rigo situation, where Dan Raphael is getting it from everyone in the boxing industry. I mean, when I say everyone, I'm talking about from Robert Garcia to Virgil Hunter. Everyone has reacted in a negative way when it comes to Dan Raphael saying in celebration of Lomachenko beating Rigo that Lomachenko, he would give Floyd Mayweather hell and possibly beat him. Now, I want to say once again, him saying that he would have gave Floyd Mayweather hell is not necessarily the problem. The problem is Dan Raphael did not say this when Terrence Crawford was knocking out Ndongo, when Errol Spence was beating Kell Brook. We didn't hear this from Dan Raphael then. But what is it about Lomachenko that all of a sudden makes you or prompts you to compare him to Floyd Mayweather of all fighters? And why is he even being compared to Floyd? Why is he not being compared to Mikey Garcia, Terrence Crawford, fighters that are fighting today, fighters that he may even face in the future? Why isn't he being compared to those guys? Why Floyd? Listen, man, I have a lot more to say about this, but I'm going to go ahead and end this video for now. I will close with saying this. Finally, the boxing world, at least when it comes to professional boxers, they've waken up, and you have a lot of professional boxers, people of significance, like the heavyweight champion of the world, Deontay Wilder, exposing racial double standards, trainer Virgil Hunter, Andre Ward, and now Edeslani Lara, Guillermo Rigo. They're exposing something that was never exposed before, which gave racist people confidence to push the agenda even further. And now it's making it very difficult to do, because now a spotlight that was never on you before is spot on your face. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.